And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of Hive Hour. I'm Gruffydds, and today we've got Luke from Northumberland Honey. Now, a lot of you probably have heard of Northumberland Honey. They're well known for their queens, and it's no secret if you watch my channel, Northumberland Honey, they are one of the main British queens we use for our nukes at Gwenyn Gruffydd. And I probably got more experience with those queens than a lot of people. I'm not saying the most, but we've had our fair share of those queens, and they are very good. So I wanted to get Luke on the episode on the channel. And I suppose we met some years ago, Luke. I don't know if you remember when we met in York. We did our what's called DASH training, so disease. Was it
accreditation? DASH? Something
disease. Accreditation, something. Right? Basically, it's like a crash, like a bee inspector crash course, disease training. That's how I describe it. And we prove ourselves to the bee unit that we know what disease looks like, and we get to monitor our own stocks for disease and work hand in hand with the bee unit that way. And I remember meeting Luke and Suzie there, and I think Luke and Suzie are a bit younger than me. And I thought I was the youngest in bee farming at the time, and then I met these two guys, and they were a lot younger than me. So, how old are you, Luke?
Oh, that's a personal question.
Yeah, well, I said I was going to ask you some hard questions. I'm 37, so I'll go first.
Right, okay, I'm 37 this year.
Oh, so, there we go. I've had a harder life than you.
Really? I'll hang on to that, being the younger.
Yeah. So, well, we're smack on the same age in the same industry, and credit to you and your wife. You've built a very successful business, and hopefully we can find out a little bit about that business today and how you got going and how you started, and for everybody watching to learn through your journey, because some of them might be wanting to follow a similar journey or maybe do something along those lines, and we're going to find out. So, with no time wasted again. Yeah. Introduce yourself, Luke, and Northumberland Honey.
Yeah, so thanks for having us on, Gruff, to start with. We feel very humbled to be on your very popular channel. I'm half of Northumberland Honey, effectively. So my wife is Suzie, who a lot of you will have met. She's obviously got kids at the moment because we've got a couple of little ones. We've got Archie, who's nearly 6, and Jasper, who is going to be 2 later this year. It's very family business, really. And we started, Northumberland Honey was established as a company, if you like, in 2015-16, but that was very much amateur, selling from a farmer's market, working from the garden shed, completely unrecognisable compared to where we're at today. It's basically a passion for beekeeping and various circumstances in our previous careers that led us to where we are today. And it wasn't really, whenever any sort of TV or anything like that tends to follow us, they tend to look at it more of sort of an escape to the country, romantic sort of thing, whereas actually our sort of move into this thing commercially and properly was really a necessity through I ended up getting carpal tunnel, which is a symptom in your hands that makes your hands go numb, basically. And I had previously trained and qualified as a dentist and done loads of work in oral surgery and got really, really far along that pathway to basically find out that I couldn't do that anymore. And it sort of just set this whole thing in motion in a cascade. We were already sort of keeping bees, but it was more of a sort of 40 colonies, let's do this at a weekend, to it really ramping up and having to support both of us. And it's a scary thing. So, if you're saying about people wanting to follow in the same sort of footsteps, I would almost recommend against it. But there's benefits to it, but I think certainly when you're making a living off bees, and it changes from you being a beekeeper as such to the bees keeping you, and that is a very, very scary prospect when we realised that would have to be the case. And fortunately, we're both really passionate about what we do, particularly the breeding and the queen rearing side of things, because each colony effectively that we have has one queen. That queen gives all of the character to that hive, how much honey it's likely to produce, the disease resistance. With 250 honey producing colonies, you could say that our whole business is underpinned by 250 queen bees at the moment and how good they end up being. So that's why from a very early stage we've been quite focused on the breeding side of it. And I suppose my background, Susie's background, with Suzie did a PhD in molecular nutrition and aging. So she's been very sciencey. She's the proper doctor amongst us, and so we both got that sort of sciencey sort of approach to everything that we do. Record keeping is right up there with everything that we do, right down to the grafting of the queens and everything. So we kind of a bit obsess over that, and I suppose we're a bit control freakish as well. So beekeeping really lends itself to people that like to try and be in control, but it does give you somewhat of a disappointment when things do go wrong. And beekeeping in our eyes, and particularly queen rearing, is being able to deal with success and failure in equal measure, basically.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize that you were a dentist before started Northumberland Honey. So you're an expert queen, really. You've got the delicate hands there, and grafting doing a filling and grafting a good egg is transferable skills, like they say.
Mine was probably more closely related to butchery, really, I suppose, in a way, because it was all surgery. I was into taking very difficult wisdom teeth out, and I've got to the point where I was actually a specialty doctor at sort of quite a high level in the hospital, teaching dental students that actually as well, and doing exam committee stuff and all sorts. So it was really quite a difference, really. And it was quite in your sort of early 30s or whenever it was, getting told effectively that this is it, and this condition is going to limit what you're actually able to do. And then you think, well, actually there's this hobby here, and I can, you basically have options open to you, and you just think, Christ, what's going to happen? So for us, it was effectively a bit of a cliff edge moment. And but everybody does like to romanticize about beekeeping, but I really think that you need to go into it with your eyes fully wide open if you're going into it commercially, because they are living creatures effectively, and very much like sheep will always find another way to die.
Yeah. So dive in a little bit there then, Luke. How did you start beekeeping then? So was beekeeping a hobby, and then things weren't going right with your health and your hands and capital, and did you then decide to go, well, I really like beekeeping, let's go all into this? Or was the beekeeping quite a substantial thing before you had capital? How did you start beekeeping?
I mean, knowing how it is now, I can categorically say it was absolutely minuscule and basically an overgrown hobby back then. They just don't even compare. The way that I started beekeeping was my dad used to keep bees, but this was like pre-Varroa. So he was one of these beekeepers that would look in the hive twice a year to take the honey off, basically, and that's the way that things were done. So he wouldn't have minded me saying we were a completely different mindset when it came to beekeeping. And actually, as a young lad starting to keep a few colonies of bees, I went along with a local sort of semi-commercial beekeeper who's keeping about 50 to 100 colonies, and he sort of took us under his wing and showed us how things were done that way, because my dad was pretty, he didn't really have that sort of level of knowledge about it. And I read books and I enjoyed it. And it was only through then meeting, Suzie, and we both sort of shared this hobby, really. And we're really lucky as sort of a husband and wife in that all of our hobbies and interests align, because there's a lot of husbands and wives that don't do the same hobbies. And I suppose now the beekeeping isn't really, well, it's definitely not considered a hobby now. In fact, I'm quite surprised that at 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening I'm allowed to talk about bees, to be honest. By this time in the week I'd be really chuffed not to be. No offense.
Hey, none taken, I know how it feels.
Yeah. But that's what it is, isn't it? So we're really lucky. We're a good team. You know, we work well together. I would say. Suzie might say differently. She's not here to defend herself. But,
so you know, when you decided like beekeeping is going to be our next thing, we're going to make this work. What was the original business model there? Were you thinking just going into honey, or did you already know that you were going to venture into all these different things?
yeah.
And for those who don't know Northumberland Honey, they do quite a few things. You do mead, you do queens, you do nukes, you do a little bit of beekeeping training, honey, candles. You know, what as the business models change from what you set out to be?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't. The problem we had is that we didn't really know what we were doing and what we were setting out to do as such, other than the mead side of it, because we have an interest in that. And with Suzie's background, and the way that the sort of timeline happened, the mead sort of came along initially as it was sort of still on that sort of overgrown hobby scale, and we'd spent a couple of summers over in Champagne, and we'd done the west coast of America, having a look at all the meaderies out there, and we wanted to produce a mead. I'd already been brewing a little bit of mead, and then Suzie came in and completely revolutionised it, basically. So my efforts were pretty poor, to be fair, as most people probably would be. And then the scientist came in, and we had to start doing proper trial batches and you know, changing little things at a time. And we thought, well, no one was doing a champagne method mead. We'd come across one over in the States, Gordon at Hydron Meadery, well worth the visit there. Absolutely stunning place. A place called Point Rees, just above San Francisco. And we chatted to Gordon. He was keeping some bees as well, and it was just, you know, it was a great sort of exchange of ideas and knowledge, really. And then we came back sort of revved up and thought, you know, let's try and get this, you know, going in some way. We knew that, you know, we're not of the sort of opinion that mead will be the next, you know, craft ale or gin or anything like that. So we just wanted to create something that we enjoyed doing, and just, you know, to see where it would go. And it's grown, and then all these other things have come into the mix. Circumstances prevailed, honey increased, bees increased, to where we're at now. And I think you get to a point where you're producing X amount of honey and wax and all the rest of it, and you think, right, well, what are we going to do? And now we've got staff who work in the business who are also interested in things like the cosmetic side of it. So we've started doing the lip balm and polish and things and candles, and it's kind of just following interests of people that are working with us, because at the end of the day, if you're going to do a good product, they've got to be passionate and interested in it, really.
Yeah,
and so, to sell product, really.
Yeah, 100%. Now, if you were to look at your business and all the different revenue schemes you get out of beekeeping, give us a rough estimated, like percentage-wise, you know, what's the queen side of the business, what's the nukes, what's the honey, what's the mead?
Yeah.
You give us a rough percentage there for people to understand your business model a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think really we've always tried to keep things at sort of a third, because it's the best way to sort of mitigate against any problems. A very experienced businessman that's also beekeeper once told me never to let anyone have more than 50% of your business, and I think that goes for whatever you're actually selling. So we have sort of kept it whereby all of the income streams are sort of growing at a similar rate. I think the honey recently, because we've produced a lot more, has overtaken the third ratio a bit and brought the other two down a little bit. But I think, you know, they're the main sort of categories for us. There's also the beeswax and stuff, but that makes up a slightly smaller percentage compared to bees, queens, honey, and mead, really.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's one thing I really like. You know, people watching my channel, they know I like a diversified income stream. So you know, if there's any branch of your business struggling, and hopefully the other bits of it then keeps you through. I know it's very efficient to do one thing really well. So say you do bulk honey really well, or you just do queens really well, do nukes really well. If anything happens in the market, you know, and it goes against you in a big way, then you know that's enough to, like, you know, finish your business if you've got one income stream. So I think you're very clever in the way you've got your way, your work lined up and different markets. You're in totally different markets as well. You're in the Queens, you're selling to beekeepers, you're selling your honey. And then, you got your mead. So, you got maybe someone who doesn't even like honey, but they like drinking. So,
that's it. Yeah, we've even done distilled mead. So even if you don't like normal mead and you just like spirits, drink that. We've got a honey beer. If you like beer, but you don't drink mead, drink that. I think it's a struggle sometimes for staff to keep up with the number of different products and how we diversify things, and of course a lot of things go online, so having all of that streamlined and the packing and staff, so we've got Suzanne who packs orders and processes those every day, and it's quite a big undertaking really, as you get bigger with that, and from one day to the next necessarily you don't actually know what's going to happen. If something goes out on TV or something as well, that can spike things. So you've got to be really flexible and adaptable to getting these peaks of when things sell a lot really.
Yeah, so I got a few questions I want to dive in a little bit on the mead side.
Yeah,
so I've seen there's a bit of a trend at the minute, people are going into low alcoholic alcohol or beverages, whatever you call it. Are you looking at that, seeing that market grow?
Well, you might have heard a whisper.
Am I a bit early on that question?
No, we're quite happy to talk about it, because this is where the distilled mead was born from, because we didn't want to just create a non-alcoholic mead that was just, most people will either ferment to a really low alcohol percentage or just create honey flavored water and stuff, but we basically have stripped the non-alcoholic portion out of the alcohol, so it's like de-alcoholized mead, which we've got, and it's okay, and we've also developed a champagne method version of that as well at like 0.5%, but you know what, we haven't released it. And it's basically because we are just literally, and I don't mind sharing this with people, because if anyone wants to have a crack, then do it. But we're reluctant. I just don't think that the market's big enough. I just, we've already gone into selling a sparkling mead where, nobody heard of sparkling mead before we started doing it. And then, you're creating your own market for it. You look at the size of the non-alcoholic wine sector compared to the wine sector, and it wouldn't even register in comparison to how much wine is actually sold. Yet people say, well, it's really popular and stuff. Well, yes, it is, and it's a trend and it's growing, but it's tiny in comparison to the mother category, if you like. And for the amount of investment that it takes to actually do labels, bottling, time of actually producing it, we just don't have the confidence in it, and that it's actually going to be a big enough thing. It's lovely and stuff, but I think when we've got all these other things going on at the moment, like certainly with the champagne method stuff, it's sat at 0.5% in bottles. It's not going off. It's we can just sit on it and see what happens, and at some point, if we're happy or want to release it or get bored or something, then we probably will. But you just sometimes have to think about things really carefully and go, is this the right thing to be investing our kids' inheritance in, basically?
Yeah, and there's one thing I want to ask as well. I think I'm right in saying you do all the mead in house in your factory there. You do everything in house, and honey extracting kit's expensive. I'm doing a new honey house this year. We've got basically a lot of stuff from Thomas coming here, and it's a lot of money. I mean, the mead kit. I mean, that must be a substantial investment to go into mead. The way that you don't say any figures, but is it a big investment if someone there is going like, well, I got a lot of honey, I can't sell it in bulk. I may try and go into mead. I mean, is it a big investment to do mead? And I suppose you got tickets or licenses to do alcohol that comes into it. I mean, talk us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it is, but I'd almost argue that it's less of an investment than the beekeeping, to be honest, probably significantly less, even at the champagne method level. The costly things really end up being getting all your bottles, and certainly if you are buying honey, we're lucky that we don't have to buy any honey for the mead. So if you're buying honey in, that's a massive investment, and we see meaderies come and go actually. They set up and then they go, all right, we have to buy this honey, but then it's like a year before they can actually sell it as finished mead. Cash flow is a huge problem for them. So, and especially if you go into it really big, really quickly, then I think it's highly dangerous. I mean, it's at our level we are quite small still, really. We produce about 3,000 bottles a year, but by wine standards, that's tiny. We've got the right kit, and we've got sort of semi-automatic disgorging unit and things, but we haven't gone the full hog and got a fully automatic line or anything that would cost £20,000 or £30,000. Again, because for our volume, we're managing with that. So it's important to just go at it at the right rate of knots, really, rather than throwing tons of money into something that you're not. You don't know exactly how many you're going to sell yet, really. So, and it's like I wouldn't really want to get into supermarkets and stuff and do big volumes, because you've still got to have the customers wanting to pick your product off the shelf, and people buy brands. So, I think slowly catch your monkey and grow slowly. But in terms of just actual outlay, I think it's probably cheaper to set up a meadery than it is to set up a bee farm, in my view. If you want, you're doing it properly, really. I mean, you can do honey in all sorts of ways and uncap things with a heater, with a kitchen knife and stuff. But that's for extracting kit, proper mead kit.
So say now, just as a rough idea, so people here watching, how many bottles of sparkling mead would say 100 kilos of honey do? Is that a simple equation?
You need to ask Suzie this. These are questions that I'm not absolutely sure of, but it's about a jar of honey, we say, that goes into a bottle. So whatever that is.
Wow, that's a lot more honey than I thought.
Yeah, there's a fair bit. So it depends what sort of alcohol level you want to go at. If you're going much lower, like 4 or 5%, it's going to be hardly any honey. But if you're up to 12, 13%, it's going to be a lot more. But the lower alcohol stuff with mead, you don't really get much of the honey taste there if you are going lower alcohol. So it's a really difficult balance. The mead sort of needs a bit of a higher alcohol level, really, just to get the honey to come through.
So I want to dive off mead. Thanks for answering those questions. That's interesting for me.
All available online, free delivery.
That's one thing I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go into mead. I mean, I don't even drink. So if I did mead,
nothing to say, you Gruff, apart from Queens.
Yeah. So everybody watching your social media now, notice that Northumberland Honey is a lot more active on social media now that you used to be. Yeah. Safe to say that you've outsourced a little bit of social media work.
Yeah.
What was the reason behind that, and why did you decide to outsource this and not do it in house?
Which time? I have absolutely no idea how you do it. I think you're mad. Well, no, clearly not. But we just don't have the time, and it was sort of figuring out what people wanted to say, and how we can get our message out to people, really. But it's still in sort of our sort of trial phase and feeding back and seeing what it's bringing back, because again, you have to figure out why you're doing it, and why you're actually engaging with social media and why you're doing it. Because for us particularly, our primary job and responsibility really is all of these bees that we're looking after, and with just our position with staffing and not how, it's difficult finding skilled beekeepers. So a lot of the work does come down to us. So, to actually find that balance with how much we have to actually say on social media versus how much work we're actually doing on the ground that people don't see is it's a difficult one to balance. So that's why we wanted some help with it. And we've just been a bit quiet recently as well, because purely we've been like, we've literally been too busy to actually film, even though we've got like a lot of really interesting stuff to film. it's just been, even that moment, there's not even enough time in the day to just grab the phone and go, oh, this would be really interesting. I mean, like the other day, there was a cell building colony that we had. Oh God, I can't remember the situation now, but it had like sealed cells in the top that were ready to come out. And the queen decided that it was massively packed. Queen right colony wanted to swarm. And we were just working away in a couple of hives down the line, and we were just looking at the front, turn around, and we're like, oh, that colony is going to be swarming. So we just went in the top to have a look. And sure, I said to Susie, oh, just look out for the queen coming out the front, and if you see it, just grab it. And of course, literally like 5 seconds later, it was one of those moments, like the queen came out, grabbed it, put it in the cage, sorted it, everything went back to normal. And you just like, stuff like that would be brilliant for social media, but we're working that flat out at the moment. We just don't have the time to even pick the phone up and go, oh, look at that.
Yeah, I know the feeling, because when I in the day, I've got to ignore my phone because the notifications and everything comes in, messages, and I try my best. I try my best to answer everything urgent, but sometimes it takes me days to get back to stuff. Because by the time you come back in the house, say it's 8 o'clock in the evening, you have a sit down. You're just mentally drained. It's like opening an email up feels like a huge task. Because you got to engage your brain, and I mean we're not immune to this. I mean, I think every bee farmer in all the whole of the UK feels like this at the minute. You go around your bees, the weather's come good. All this, everybody thought they had a little bit of time with the cold weather. We've had 2 weeks of good weather, and all that time you thought you had is gone. And there's beekeepers like working 5 jobs basically off a single. A day. You get 5 jobs done in a day, basically. But, that's just bee farming. Now,
I will say one thing about all of that and workload. One thing that's really helped us is that we have now. So I mentioned Suzanne, who does just production work basically for us inside, and also we have Liana, who's been with us a while now, a couple of years, but she's become effectively our. Well, we call her production manager, but she's more of our PA actually now, really, as well, to be one of a better word. And I'd say 80% of the emails that come through to us now just get forwarded onto her to address. And I think anybody in the bee farming industry that's wanting to grow a business at all, especially looking at staff wise, I would always say try to get people that can do the inside jobs, because the outside jobs in the bees, it is notoriously difficult to find people. We've done the apprenticeship scheme ourselves a couple of times, and people even after that go off and do something else or something. So actually, it's incredibly difficult finding those skilled beekeepers. Whereas we've now modified the business almost to school hours, so 9 till 3, because that fits us as well for kids. And that opened up the door massively to people being able to work for us and wanting to. When we put a job advert out 9 till 3, and what we were doing, we got about 60 applications from, all brilliant people. So those sort of jobs can, easily be done. And actually, you don't realise how much of that admin stuff really takes up all of your time. So we're a lot less stressed now from that, hopefully.
That's good. So apart from social media, then how do you market your products? Basically, do you do a lot of Google ads? I know you do a lot of farm, markets, that kind of thing. Marketing. There in the flesh. What other ways do you sell your honey?
I'll mention Google ads and Facebook ads and all the rest of it now, because I proudly can say that we've never spent a penny on either. And wow. I wouldn't do. Yeah, I spoke to a guy once that was selling forklifts. He was our old neighbour. He ended up losing loads of money on those because his competitors and stuff were just clicking on them all the time, and and just non-clicks, and depending on it's quite pricey. So yeah, we've to this date just decided that was something that wasn't going to be on our strategy, and we've tried to just. With that slow organic growth, we're not trying to jump to the top for anything. We just hope that people will come back. Various people say, if you can sell something once, that's okay. But, if you can sell it 2 or 3 times, then that's even better. And that's the direction that we're going. We just want to look after the repeat regular customers and just let it grow, because to be honest, it's grown big enough, quick enough for us now. Like, you know, we never want this to be a thing that is grown up and sold, fattened up and sold on, as it were. So it's a family business. It's here for the long haul for the kids. So we just need to, you know, having not planned this journey as such, we just want it to grow organically and sustainably. And I think a big key part of that is your repeat customers, really, and having those guys coming back to you. So that's why we do look after them.
That's good. So you built up, you know, I'm sure you don't mind me saying, you know, quite a substantial honey farm there, especially between everything you sell. I mean, what kind of big mistakes have you done along the way that some beekeepers here could learn off you and not do the same mistake when they're growing their bee business?
God, I mean, well, it depends what aspect you want to cover, really. But now, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this, but we actually now have a board with a certain word on it that's something up for every month, and basically whoever gets the worst one has to pay for the staff's lunch on the last Friday of the month. So could go and reference that and include running into various things and breaking stuff, but that's not really what you're asking, I guess. But in terms of I think the biggest thing that beekeepers generally do from a small scale is, you know, you'll find a queen cell in a colony, queen cells, you know, colony wanting to swarm, and you just split it out and then you let it raise its queens from that colony, do a walkaway split or something, but you effectively just breed from those colonies that you don't really want, that are really swarmy. So that's the first thing, trying to address the, you know, quality of the stock if you can, really, at all times, you know, and any beekeeper, any bee farmer will have, you know, a varying range of quality of stock. Everybody does, from slightly more aggressive bees to absolutely docile bees. You know, there is, even in an operation where everything is docile, you've still got variation within that. So it's constantly trying to select for the best bees that you can that are in your operation, if you're going to go into queen rearing yourself, or buying, you know, good queens in, and you know, trying to work with those, but appreciating that queens are a lottery ticket. You know, an open mated queen mating with 18 or 20 drones, you know, it could have 18 or 20 different genetic influences on it. So it's a tricky one to get right, but certainly spending some time in trying to improve your queens and your bees is, you know, without doubt, one of the best things that you can do. And I'd also say, when it comes to our sort of spring routines, is marking and clipping queens, because you'll save yourself a right load of headache in losing swarms and productivity. So although we do weekly inspections, the clipping of the queens really does help for any times that we, you know, that slips at all and anything does want to swarm. So our swarming rate ends up being exceptionally low, and we don't tend to really lose swarms from the way that we're managing them. And I think if you can get to a point of doing that, then you're going to really start to ramp up your average honey crop, which for us was about 69 kilos, I think, last year. Wow, and that was a really poor header crop.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, well, I agree with that. I mean, clipping queen, you know, that saves me loads, because we don't do 7-day inspections, and you know, that's one job me and Andy we've got to do now. Once the nuke starts cooling down, we need to get around everything, and everything that's formed last year, we got to clip those new queens this year, and keep on top of it. But yeah, I agree. That's excellent advice, really, because you're better off losing the queen and the bees still to be there, and you know, for you to be able to fix that colony for a new queen to take over, and you know, chances are you still have some honey off that hive, off the back of it. Now, if you were to start this from all over again, and I suppose I'm looking at the audience here is beekeepers, so from the beekeeping operation side of it, would you do anything different? Would you choose a different hive type, different frame type? You know,
ironically, I think if I was to do it all again, I would focus on just producing. This is contrary to some other commercial beekeepers would tell you, but I would concentrate on just producing bulk honey and keep the only cost that I have as my mobile phone contract, probably.
Would you really not after how many queens you sell and everything?
No, I mean, I do enjoy this. That's the thing. But I think if I was to, this is like pure. This isn't me trying to say to people, don't do what we're doing, and competition and all the rest of it. It is genuine, like work-life balance. What you actually get back from it, and seeing other beekeepers doing this as well, where you can comfortably manage 200 to 300 colonies on your own. Sell a load of bulk honey, put the bees to bed in October, and then get back to it in the spring. And there is something really nice, in my view, about that sort of lifestyle, really. And it's something that I think people tend to miss, because you get led by the market a lot of the time, especially when things get quite big and people start asking for stuff, and you just start saying yes. So you got to know when to say no, I guess. But also, my advice for people is to try and keep it simple if you can. But that's probably sat from the side of the table where things have got more complicated.
Yeah, yeah. I know exactly how you feel, because I feel like that with my life. There's not much work-life balance. I work every day. At the minute, we're probably working, me and Anghara probably do 12 to 14 hours every day. Between what we do in the office, when we're at home doing the social media work, getting nukes ready. I was doing nukes today, getting ready for this week, just because, to take the pressure off tomorrow. Then I'm doing this as well. And I look at the bulk guys thinking, wouldn't it be nice to sell all your honey in September, get one massive check, and go on, a cruise or something for 3 months?
It'd be great.
I know that lifestyle is much harder to achieve now with the honey market as it is, but I think the big guys, they did have a really good life up until now, I suppose. But that's the life we chose, and you're better off being busy than not busy.
It's true.
That's what I tell everybody. If you're stressed out because of all the work you've got to do, that is a better stress than having no work, sales coming in, and you having bills to pay, and you haven't got the money to pay it. So
it's true.
This kind of stress is way, way better than the other side of stress.
Yeah, you make some money, you just don't have enough time to spend it.
or the money just turns, and nothing really comes of it. But we're all busy fools. But that's beekeeping, really. I mean, beekeeping is farming. It's a lifestyle thing. You really gotta enjoy it. Chances are you're not going to be a millionaire if you're going to be a bee farmer. There's the odds are against you there, but the quality of life and everything is, nothing beats it. It's that's what I think anyway. But going back to Northumberland Honey, so I know you're at least 3 full-time in the business. How many are you in the business? And I suppose, what jobs does everybody do?
Yeah, so we've got myself, we've got Suzie, we're full-time, obviously. Suzanne's full-time. Leanna is almost full-time. She'd say she was full-time because she does reply to emails outside of hours as well. We didn't have to do, but she just does it. She's great. I hope she's watching this. And then we have a couple of friends from New Zealand who just come over for a couple of weeks in the summer. They're on holiday, but they just help out. They basically retired, and they've run a big commercial queen rearing operation of like 10,000-15,000 queens a year out there. And Penny is literally a queen inseminator, and Gary is a queen rearer. And they've sort of, for the past couple of summers, just come and spent some time with us and sort of been like a bit mentorish, really, and helping us get the II done and how best to run things. And that sort of New Zealand sort of approach to things has really massively changed what we do and how we look at doing stuff. And I think it probably, again, comparing bee farming to sheep farming, really, it's a very similar sort of mindset that they've got in in New Zealand about doing things commercially, and just in terms of even record keeping. And I think we've increased our number of whiteboards by 5-fold since meeting those guys, it's really helped. So that's basically our structure, and the rest of the time it's just me and Suzie and Suzanne and Liana. We've had apprentices as well in the past, and we're not ruling out taking on another apprentice. Whenever we advertise for apprentices, we get completely bombarded. So at the moment, we are just sort of sat quietly, and if anybody's CV comes across the desk that looks particularly interesting, then we would take them on in a heartbeat. But it's sort of filtering out the people that think that we sort of sit in a lay-by with a straw hat on selling honey all day, as opposed to the people that want to lift heavy boxes from one place to another that may be full of bees or may not, and they're the sort of people that I want.
I want to ask basically all the questions that everybody's watching wants to know, and that's about your queens. Everybody they're interested in your queens. Now, talk me through your queens. Now, I know you've got 2 lines. You've got your Buckfast, and you've got a dark, British dark, you call them.
Yeah.
But talk us through your two lines, or if you've got a third line coming out or whatever. I know you've got different lines of Buckfasts, but we've definitely got people here interested in your Buckfast and interested in your dark queen. So talk us through that. What's the difference, and I suppose why should people buy them?
Well, I mean, it's good. I mean, the Buckfast we've sort of had going for a while, and from starting out as a kid and everything, bought bees in before. And we've worked with a few other bee farmers to sort of develop different lines, and it's they're just really good bees that we produce in our part of the world. But the dark ones are really interesting in that with the instrumental insemination, we're hoping to be able to produce a good dark bee that it's a stable line that produces as much honey as the Buckfast ones and is effectively commercially viable, so that people have a choice of going down a dark bee route that will do as much as any Buckfast would do, really. And in our part of the world, we've got a good area where there are dark bees, and I've sort of stayed away from calling them AMM because that's not really been part of our selection criteria until very recently, where we've had working with some people locally who have had them genetically tested, their stock to 95% AMM, and we've sort of put that into the mix, and it works, working really well. So this year we're hoping to artificially inseminate 200 dark AMM tendency queens that are hopefully going to be able to then be selected. And our sort of goal in terms of nukes really is to probably move slightly away from just open mated queens in nukes to more selected overwintered instrumentally inseminated queens in nukes, and that's sort of our direction of travel with that. But they're just they're just all the lines that we're producing, we're aiming for the same things, and we've tried to put some line information out there for people so that it can help them see what we've seen with the daughters, and give them a choice in terms of what they're looking for, because I think that is something certainly in the UK market that's quite lacking at the moment. There's not a great deal of transparency in terms of where these queens are coming from, or what lines they are, so people don't often get much of a choice in what they're buying. But then from a hobbyist perspective, that actually becomes really confusing, giving them line information, when in actual fact, for somebody that just wants a queen to replace a hive that they've got, it's almost, in my view, almost irrelevant going into sort of line information for that sort of person. But and it's almost overcomplicating it, because like when you're open mating queens and they're mating with 18 or 20 different drones, like I say, it's a bit of a lottery ticket. We are flooding the area with the drones that we want to use, but it's still, if you buy one queen, it's a lottery ticket. If you buy 10 queens, you're increasing your odds and making it, slightly more favourable that you might get the very best queen that we've ever sold you, and I want to buy it back.
That's one thing I want to ask you. So, most breeders in the UK, they buy breeder queens in, and that's their breeder queen, and they graft off that. Do you do a similar thing there in Northumberland, or do you breed your own breeder queens there and breed off them?
We're breeding our own, and it's helped by, so there are a couple of bee farmers which you'll see in the lines that we've put on, that we've worked with, where basically they've and it just basically allows us to select from a huge number of colonies, because it takes our sort of 250 honey production colonies up to sometimes near enough 2,000 colonies if that other bee farmers selected their best queen. So we've worked with a couple of other bee farmers to get their best queens, and then we can put those into our mix, and that's sort of creating enough diversity for us to be able to hopefully continue to produce breeder queens, really.
So what's the main key target points do you look for on a queen? There's a few questions that have appeared down here, so I want to ask you now before I forget.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are asking about VHS.
Yeah.
Do you look for that in the dark queens and in the buckfast?
Yeah, both. Yeah. So that is a sort of what do you call it? My mind's fried. A stop test. Yeah. So basically, if it's not getting to beyond 90-95%, then it's not going to really come forward. So we need to, it's one of the final things that we do. And people always badger us sometimes in sort of March time, going, "Oh, can I have the VSH traits for this particular line?" when we haven't actually fully assessed them yet. And so the VSH is just a varroa sensitive and hygienic trait. We're doing a pinprick test, which kills the pupa through the cappings. And then we go back in, and over a period of 24 or 48 hours, we can see how much of the brood the bees have removed that's died. And that is sort of an olfactory response for the bees detecting that something is wrong in the brood and then clearing it out. So it's good for selecting for, sensitivity to foul brood as well as varroa, in sort of uncapping and recapping that the bees do, which you can actually see as well. So it's just about trying to help the bees to be more resilient to varroa, really, which I think, again, going back to tips for new beekeepers, I mean, ultimately the two things that are going to kill your bees are varroa or starvation. So, varroa is right up there on our radar. So, we do mite washes on sites every month just to keep an idea of what the mite levels are like.
And you look for because sometimes you buy these imported bees in, they got amazing brood, they lay the full frames up, but then the second the weather turns bad, they can starve out. And where I am in Wales here, I don't want those bees. I like the bees. When you look at the frame in the brood box, I like having honey on the outside and a little bit of pollen around there. Yeah. Is that a kind of trait that you look for, or are you looking for slabs of brood?
No, I mean, you need them to be able to have a good brood nest, but they've got to be able to manage that. And increasingly, we used to run everything on doubles, but now increasingly we're looking to run on singles. But those bees on a honey crop to produce like 4 or 5 supers above that single brood box without any particular management of that bottom box. So she's got to be able to have a nice honey band around it and lay all the way to the outside frames, but manage that nest and have the stores and the reserves around it. So, we do get bees producing great big slabs of brood, and that's nice, but they've just got to adapt to the weather, which does make it difficult when you're trying to get nukes ready really early, because sometimes the queens just don't want to kick off laying. Like this year, we had to delay our nuke collections by 2 weeks for the first time in about 8 years, because the queens just they just paused, and they were just like, "No, hang on a minute, this weather is really not appropriate to be laying a load of brood right now." And we go through them and like, "You're not ready." And then now we're just sending them out, and I'm like, "My God, these are stunning!" And this is exactly what we want to see, and these will be no bother for people, but I was a bit, concerned. People will be wanting nukes and stuff really early, but the queens might. I don't know. It's we do select for them to try to look after their brood nest quite well, because as well, going back to cost, it costs money to feed bees, and sugar is cheap and everything, but we don't really want to be feeding if we can avoid it. So trying to select for bees that can deal with that situation is part of the whole process, really, and something that I think gets forgotten about a bit. And it is a cost.
Interesting. You say that about they were slow starting, because I saw that with your queens this year, with the ones, because I had some late queens off you last year. The September came good, and I phoned you up and said, any chance for some late queens? And they are amazing now. They fill the box and they've sold and they've gone. But I was going through them early in the season, and they didn't want to kick off. But if those are the kind of bees that you want in your honey producing hives, hives that they're not going to starve out on me, I can forget about them for a while, I'm not under pressure to visit them. So I mean, I think that's a really good trait. I think
and it's kind of like the low swarming as well
in spring, and if you can dodge that bullet by having them wait till the weather is good before they kick off, I mean, I think that's a huge trait in bees.
Yeah, we've seen as well with these particular breeding these with a sort of more compact brood nest. When we've tried to run them on doubles, we've seen them more wanting to swarm earlier than if we've actually left them on a single box. And I do wonder whether it's something to do with the queen pheromone not getting distributed as well. But in a single box, she almost gets around it more. So that is a change really in the last couple of years, that we've gone more towards this single brood box management, and actually it's our average honey yield has gone up at the same time, and it's a lot easier when we're just doing our swarm checks. We're literally just tipping that bottom box, smoking the bottom bars, and seeing if there's any eggs in cups or jelly, and that's it. And so that swarm check effectively is a minute to 2 minutes a hive. So that's where we need to be.
And just to confirm for everybody watching, nationally using, isn't it? Langstroth did
national. Yeah, we've toyed with changing back all over to Langstroth. If we were doing bulk honey, I think we might do, but something people always forget about is an exit strategy in bee farming as well. And I think there's a bigger market for selling national hives if you ever needed to sell up than there is Langstroth. So
yeah, well, that's true, because we bought a guy over last year and they were all national, and if it was any other frame size, we would have probably said no. But maybe now I'm too committed on national. I mean, I've got hundreds of supers, and we're going to run a little bit of Langstroth here at home and have everything home Langstroth, purely basically because of what Flow Hive is doing to the market, basically. And we got the NL hives, but I mean, national is still huge, and it even though I keep saying I think national is past its peak. I think it's peaked and it's coming down a bit.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, but 10 plus years will go again before Langstroth can gain decent ground. National is not going anywhere, but it goes to prove. I keep saying I hate double brooding full size colonies, because then when there is queen cells, you got 2 boxes to go through, and you go through all these frames. What do you do with the top box? All these supers are on the roof. Where you put that, and it's just huge work, really. So I'm glad to hear someone on your scale saying a single national brood box will produce on average 70 kilos of honey, and you won't find many people in the UK that can beat that.
No, well, do you know, I'll share a little secret as well in our management strategy. So it is single for most of the time. But coming towards the end of the rate, we give them a second brood box to go onto as we're clearing. And what then tends to happen, so the queen will start laying that up. We then go back and push the queen down into a single again, just with all the open brood. And this is part of our Varroa strategy. So everything just gets shaken. We don't look for the queen, shake it into the bottom box with the open brood, queen excluder, and then above that we put all of the sealed or sealing brood. That box, then we come back, take that away once the bees are back up into it, and put it into a mating site and drop a cell in it. It then gets vaporized with oxalic 19 days later, approximately, so that queen has gone out and mated, come back, started laying, but all of the brood is emerged, so the Varroa has nowhere to hide. The original colony, when we've taken that split box off it, all she's left with is open brood, so the honey supers have come off. that colony has all the open brood. We blast that at that moment in time. So we are effectively at the end of May, beginning of June, getting to hitting as much of the Varroa as we possibly can. And what we saw last year with that is we were doing mite washes on the heather in August and getting either zeros or ones, which in comparison to previous years was, that's brilliant. And I think with the VSH traits with the bees, people often assume that we have to have the stress of a Varroa infestation to allow the bees to be selected for these traits, but that isn't really the case. And actually allowing Varroa to build up in any way is damaging enough with the viruses that it can transmit. So we just take a view that, we have to have in our management strategy, a relatively cheap method, a fairly organic method of dealing with the mites is fairly soft touch and certainly a lot cheaper than having to use strips. And from what we've seen, the bees, again, coming through winter have been fantastic. So that, that in terms of a really strong management strategy, I would really recommend it. It's not good vaporizing in the middle of summer though, when you've got all the mask on and everything. It's horrible. So that's again probably why people wouldn't want to work for us.
Yeah. Now, going back to the queens, so talk us through. A lot of people would be interested in how you make queens, because I'm not going to say how many queens you do, but you do hundreds, thousands.
1,000 usually.
Yeah. I'm talking, per month. But you do a lot. There's not many people in the UK that do more queens than you, anyway. Yeah. So talk us through it. How do you make queens on that kind of scale for people to understand the gist of it?
Yeah, so we use the NICOT system without allowing the queen to lay in the frame. We don't do that. We graft. So we pick up a day-old larvae from the breeder queen into the cell cup, and it's on we have a national frame effectively with grooves cut in the side with a bar in the 3 bars usually on there. So each colony that's receiving these is getting anything from 22 for 2 bars, or 3 it'll get 36 to start with, and we use a combination of queen right or queenless starters sometimes, and finishers. So we tend to have around about 16 finishers on the go at any one time, and once the cells are sealed, we'll take them into the incubator where they'll just sit, and then we've got a carry cell which sort of we can decant the cells into. So a day before emergence, we'll take those out and put them into the mating nukes, and that's effectively the process. A very whistle-stop tour. We've got a queen lab here now that was new that we put in at the end of last year. So if anybody does want to come and have a look, I'm sure you'd be more than welcome to. Just give us plenty of notice. It all happens in a sort of 4x5 meter room sort of thing, really. And we've got the instrumental insemination stuff set up there with 2 microscopes, so two people can work at the same time, and then a grafting table. And we've also we try to be really efficient with all the cell cups coming back in and having to get them renewed. So we've got sort of one. This is going back from my sort of medical days, I guess, because we've got a dirty side of the room and a clean side. So all the used frames go on a rack on the left hand side, and then all the finished ones are on the right. So as soon as you walk in the room, you're like, whether we've got enough ready to go again. There's a lot to it, but it's all about timing really with queens and getting that day-old larvae and making sure that you're grafting them young enough so where you can effectively barely see them, and making sure that your colonies that are receiving these grafts are themselves on the verge of swarming, because that's really the only way that they're going to have to be strong enough to actually raise cells. So and I think that's where some people get let down, because the grafting is a difficult technique, and it's not to say belittle it in any way, but a colony that wants to take cells will take cells. So I think people get hung up on the mechanics of actually grafting, but invariably it's the condition of the colony that tends to affect the results.
So when you drop the cell in to say the apideer or whatever you're using, how long would you say that it takes that? I'm guessing you put them in there, and next day that they hatch out. It's probably that close with you. How much time would you say it takes for those queens to start laying from the day you put it in the apidea?
Generally, they usually mate around day 4, somewhere between day 4 and 8, I would say. Sometimes a little bit longer if the weather. But having been around hundreds and hundreds of mating nukes and seeing queens coming back in, I'd say that's a pretty reliable date window. If they're not mated within a couple of weeks, it starts to get a little bit sketchy as to whether they will. And often weather windows can, hamper that. But generally, we'll be going back about 2 to 3 weeks just to check to see whether they've laid or not. Because one of the other things, and you speak to people that are running apideas and mating nukes and stuff, it's actually getting the best out of them. And invariably, it's failure from absconding or a queen failing, that actually causes that nuke to fail. But in the season, if you're sat there with an empty apidea, not doing anything for 2 or 3 weeks, you've missed a complete round. On average, our apideas will produce 3.5 queens a year. We do tend to start fairly early and work through to quite late. But they've got to be worked, and they've got to be sort of managed like individual hives, really, and you've got to be in them quite a lot, and you've got to keep an eye on feeding them and stuff. And I know there's a big sort of push towards using things like Mini Plus and other styles of mating nukes that take more bees, that are slightly bigger and slightly more resilient to variations in weather and stuff. But we started with apidea. We're a bit too far in now to change it, and in reality, for the number of bees that it takes, and it's relatively easy to stock them, I don't think we'd particularly change that. And we've actually successfully overwintered apideas as well, which is a thing that we're hoping to do increasingly more to try to address this early queen thing. But the really interesting thing, I'm going off on a tangent, Gruff, sorry.
People are watching this and overwintering bees and appideas. Like I know, I don't know if you know Ricky Wilson. He was a big bee farmer. Unfortunately, died during COVID, and he told me he does this. So no, you keep talking. If the queen readers, and I just want to say now quickly as well, we've got a couple more questions we're going to ask Luke, and a lot of people have been telling me they want a Q&A as well. So if anybody wants to ask Luke specific questions, put them in the chat now, and I'll pick some of the best ones right at the end. I don't want to take more of Luke's time than what I need to, but if anybody's got specific questions they want to ask Luke, drop them in the comment section there, and I'm going to ask them at the end. So you carry on with the apidea. And that's one thing I wanted to ask quick as well with the apidea.
Yeah.
How long do you give that apidea before you write that queen off?
So it'll be
time goes before there's no eggs, and you go.
It'll be after somewhere between that 2 and 3 week mark when we do our first checks, and then invariably, if it's not gone out and mate, and you actually look at the queen carefully, it will have a damaged wing or a damaged foot, or there'll be something wrong with it. So waiting any longer is often the dubious anyway. And actually, and increasingly, the last few years since we met these guys from New Zealand, I'd never seen this before until they pointed it out, that queens can actually get egg bound like chickens. And actually, we addressed one of these with a pair of tweezers, and it actually then started laying. It was absolutely unbelievable. But I've seen it a couple of times now. But there's various reasons why they won't get mated. If it's not to do with the weather and everything else is mated, then something's wrong with it. Get rid and put another cell in. And that's at this sort of level, queens need to be a bit of a commodity, really, and they just sort of need to be available and coming through the line at all times. But going back to the overwintered stuff, we are keen to try and help with the demand for early queens, and the only way that we've sort of been able to do this is overwintering apideas and 2 or 3 extensions on them. And we've got a really nice spot now where we very successfully have overwintered apideas, and we've just not broadly released these overwintered queens because we've just basically, as we say, look after we've had people that have come to us and said, can I have X many overwintered queens? And we've provided. And so what it enables us to do is actually stock apideas differently. So what happens is the overwintered queens will go out in April when we start to split the apideas out and stock them with new cells, so it works for us. And these queens are actually proven and overwintered. So the difficulty for us in terms of where we pitch this is that this is actually like a selected, it's not like, you know, a selected for breeding queen, but, you know, she has got some selection there, and she's actually likely a much better queen than any early imported queens that might not have mated even that well, because a lot of the countries where they're imported from, they won't get the best matings early in the season, like, you know, we don't get the very best matings early in the season. So they're very good queens, and we'd like to, you know, we need to run numbers on it, and we're hoping that at the end of this season we'll be in a position to say overwinter 300 or 400 at least in apideas, and then have them ready for sale in April, and hopefully address a little bit of the early queen market for people wanting, you know, queens from the UK. Actually, you know, you say they're overwintered queens, people will be like, oh, well, I want a really young queen. Well, that queen was, you know, she'll have only been mated in September or something, and some of those queens are brilliant, really, really good queens. I'd have an overwintered September mated queen over an April mated queen in the UK any day, really.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, and pretty sure you'll find a market for those queens really easy. And that, you know, because the reason I use imported queens at the start of the season is just because I've got, you know, a lot of my nukes are double brood. I sell the 6 best frames off with a queen. I mean, I've got good brood and bees left over. I want to give them a queen and keep that going. So maybe, but by you doing that and having access to British queens really early, that, you know, that could be a game changer. And I'm not aware of anybody else doing that. Now, I am going to change things a little bit. I did have some quick fire questions here.
Okay.
I'm going to dodge because we've got some better questions coming in, and I'm just going to flag some questions up for you, Luke, and then 10-15 minutes you can go home because Luke is in work still.
Put mating nukes out, but it's thunderstorm at the moment, so I might have to wait until the morning for that.
Yeah, I'm not going to keep you for too long. Right. I'm just going to show some questions on the screen now. So we've got Andrew. Last year, wasps wiped out our mated nukes. How can we prevent this? We even moved them to different areas and still lost. I suppose you know that is a really good question. I mean, wasps in the apideas are small. What do you do?
Do you know? When we first started, a lot of people in the group will recognise the name Jed Marshall. He was quite influential in us, you know, in terms of a go-to guy telling us how to run apideas and stuff. And you know, I asked him about wasps and stuff, and he said he'd never had, you know, an apidea overcome with wasps before that was strong enough and working enough. And I think that is something that I didn't really subscribe to initially, and I thought, oh, it's a risk. And subsequently, I think if they're actually strong enough, the wasps will not. I mean, you know, we get wasp pressure, but I don't suppose that would be like, you know, for potentially much further south, and, you know, you get Asian hornets and stuff cropping up now. But I think just keeping them absolutely as strong as you can. Moving them, you know, you could do, but you may have to consider trapping wasps as well. And I know things like Trap It work really, really well for that, if you want to go down that route. But I think when you're managing an apidea, one really useful tip in terms of getting strength into that apidea that people may not do is that you can actually go to a really strong colony, shake a load of young bees into a box, get a ladle or a scoop, and once you've sprayed them with a bit of syrup, and just dump a cupful or 2 cupfuls or 3 cupfuls, however strong you need it to be, just dump it on the entrance of the apidea, and you'll just boost it. So that's, you know, we've got some drone rearers that are very strong in some of the mating apiaries, and if we want to take those back a little bit, we'll shake some young bees out of those into a box, spray them up, and we'll just carry them around with us when we're going around the mating nukes. And if there's anything that's like not quite filling out that third frame, dump a load of young bees on the front, in they go, and then the next time you're there, you know, you wouldn't notice. It's really strong. So that's a good tip, I would think, just to try and keep them strong.
That's a really good tip. So here's the next one. Can you use fondant rather than syrup in your apideas?
Absolutely, definitely use fondant. especially on the initial stocking, because you'll notice with an apodea, it's got a slide underneath. So when you come to stock them, you turn them upside down, open the drawer on the bottom. Again, stocking with young bees with a scoop. If you turn your apodea upside down with syrup, and it's not going to last very long. So you want to make sure that you use fondant to start with. And I always think to really brim it up with fondant right to the top, because it stops the bees from getting access into the feeder compartment. And so that if they get access early on, they're more likely to build comb in there, and it'd be a bit difficult. But then what you tend to find, which is really useful, once they've eaten that fondant out and they're getting quite strong, they actually build a lot of brace comb in the feeder. And then we'll go round with basically like a knapsack and with syrup in it. And when we're noticing the flow's coming to an end, we'll just fill that up with syrup. And then the brace comb works beautifully as like a little float for the bees. So it's having that in place. So I'd say start off with fondant, and then I'd just move on to syrup after that. But if you've not got anything in the feeder, put some grass in or something, so that the bees have got something to float on if there's no wild comb in there.
Lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And do you use blowers or clearer boards when you're stripping honey?
I hate blowers, really, and we've played around with them when we were smaller. But actually, a good clearer board with the you'll know what these are called, like the big rhombus escapes. They're brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so we use those. We do have a blower. It gets very little action, really, other than, for taking the very last, if there's a few bees to just flick off at the end of a site or something. But increasingly, we use it less and less. And I think, some commercial beekeepers would rely on them. But for us, I wouldn't say that it's an absolute necessity if the clearer boards are working well.
And here's a nice question, because I've always thought this.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best queen candy? What do you put in your cages when you're sending queens out? Is it just plain baker's fondant, or is there a Luke and Suzie?
No, you can get, there's two schools of thought on this. There really is. And we've used candy pollen, which is, brilliant. There's lots of rich pollen and things in there, and we think that works very well. But you'll tend to find most imported queens and queens that are hanging around for a bit are using really hard fondant. And I think a lot of the queen candies that are marketed are quite hard, because they expect that queens are going to be in a cage for a long time, so they don't want to get stuck in it. So it's a balance between how soft the fondant is, how easy the bees can get to it, because equally if the fondant dries out, it's not going to be any good to them at all to actually eat and use. And when you come into introduction, if it's really hard, they can get stuck in the cages, and that's not going to be any good for anybody. So I haven't really found exactly the most ideal one, but I would say something like we have been using apipasta for the fondant recently, and I'd be more than happy to be putting that into the queen cages really this time. So I think just changing as well, been open to change and trying out different things. But we've exported queens to. We exported quite a few queens last year, and this was brilliant, because we approached the National Bee Unit about this, and they're like, export? They're like, I don't think anybody's ever asked us that. Are you sure you don't mean import? And my God, we had to have we've had to have vet certificates. Anyway, it's a nightmare, but we got through it. And so when they're travelling longer, you definitely want a harder fondant, because you don't want bees getting stuck in the candy. So it's a difficult one. And when we've been putting queens in using candy pollen, it's great. They get introduced really quickly, and I think there's a good school of thought for getting a queen in quick. To us, a laying queen is a queen that's in a cage that you've bought as an open-mated laying queen. But to the bees, once that queen hasn't been laying for 24 hours, that is actually a non-laying queen, which makes introduction a completely different ball game. If we pick a queen up out of an apodea, went to another hive and picked the old queen off the frame and literally dropped that new queen in the place that queen was from, and she started laying straight away, that can be as good an introduction as any. But that introduction process never really happens like that. But I'd just say trying to get them in as quickly as you can as well is important. So Yeah, you've opened a can of worms with the fondant question.
Yeah, well, there we go. Luke has given an honest answer there, and he's given you some products you guys can try, and see how that goes. And if the fondant runs and kills the queen, don't blame Luke. Or if don't blame Luke like that.
I've been blamed for this.
Yeah, I've had some problems with buying queens in the past, and the candy's really hard, and the queen is still there, and everybody's drowning in the sugar because it's too runny, and it is hard. You got to find the right.
I will say one thing you definitely mustn't do is leave them on the dashboard of the truck. For like 20 seconds, and you'll go back and they'll all be dead.
It's like a micro, like like back in the day with a microscope,
magnifying glass.
Yeah.
I did that with some virgins once. Never, ever, ever again.
Yeah, I just asked the question about double how to get happy days through the winter. You've already answered that with double brooding, triple brooding. We've got another question here on wasps, which you've just answered, and I'll give you this last question. It's quite a nice one, a bit of comedy value to it. So, do you prefer extracting honey now, or would you prefer extracting teeth?
Well, do you know what? It's funny because I can't remember the last time I actually extracted any honey. Which is, I hope that's a good sign of how we're running things, really, because Suzie sort of oversees that, which is great. But it is like Leanna and Suzanne that would be doing all of that. And I mean, like jarring honey, I honestly cannot remember the last time that I jarred a jar of honey. It was probably before we got the jarring machine years ago. And actually, a lot of me does think about my previous career with really fond memories, thinking about going back. And I do, toil with it, really. At the moment, the slight difficulty is just the position that everything's in, really. And it needs me at the moment more now than it sort of ever did, in a very strange way. So, yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, certainly I haven't that much experience of extracting honey recently.
What I got Liam, he's dived in. No more questions after this one. And Luke really needs to go. He's got some work to do, but I'm gonna throw you this one, and I'm gonna let you go, Luke. So please, one more. If I've got no brood and I put a queen in, will they sort things? It's been 3 weeks since any brood.
I mean, I personally, if you've got another hive, I'd be putting a test frame in it. Really, that's the old, technical answer there, and seeing if they draw any queen cells from it. You can do. I think with experience, you can very quickly know whether a colony is queen right or queenless just from the noises and things that it's making. 3 weeks since no brood, there's a good chance that you've still got a virgin queen in there. And I think if we look at the actual queen sales and market, I'm personally, this is just a hunch, but I'm almost convinced that 50% of the people that order a queen for next day don't actually need one, because the bees will often sort it out. And we get people that come to us and say, oh, this didn't work, and this queen didn't go in, and I checked the queen cells and there wasn't any. And my usual response, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, is like, well, you should come and work for us if you're absolutely certain that you didn't miss any queen cells, because do you know what, even I missed some. and they do, and the bees have a really, really funny way of being able to sort the job out, and that's how they survive. So there's telltale signs to look for. If they've polished cells up and it looks like there's a chunk of cells that are empty in the middle of the frame that look really polished and shiny, those bees are expecting a queen to start laying. The difficulty you've got at 3 weeks is that if it lasts for much longer, there's a chance of getting laying workers. As the brood pheromones disappeared. So, you've got to do something about it, but trying to find out your queen position is important. If you get a test frame in there and they don't raise any queen cells, then you've got a good idea that they've got something on the go. They've got a virgin in there somewhere. But it comes down to, often in those situations, whether you want to risk spending the money on putting your queen in and it potentially not working. Now, me being originally from Yorkshire, if I was in that situation, I'd be looking to probably buy a virgin queen rather than a mated queen if I wasn't absolutely sure, and just put that in there. Of course, that'd be like 19 quid or something instead of nearly 50. You know, that's where the virgin queens have a really good, you know, a good value, I guess.
Perfect. Well, Luke, thank you so much for coming on Hive Hour with me. For everybody watching, I'm sure they've had excellent source of information there, especially if they do want to do a bit of queen rearing, or they were interested in mead. Thank you very much for your time. I've learned loads. You've been a great guest. I'm gonna let you get back to work. Hopefully that storm has passed. And,
I'm going to get wet. That's a sign of being a bee farmer, that you actually get very wet in the bee suit very often.
Yeah, I fully appreciate I've taken up the dry time tonight. But I really appreciate it, Luke. And before you go, tell everybody where, if they want to buy queens from you, what should they do? Yeah. How would they go about doing that? Where should they go?
So we've got the website is northumberlandhoney.co.uk, and you go onto the online shop. There's either the Bookfast, you just go for queens for sale, and then there's either Bookfast or darks and virgins, queen cells. There's instrumentally inseminated ones if you really want to treat yourself. The delivery weeks at the moment, our first one is the end of May, but I think that's fully booked because people generally pre-order quite a bit in advance, increasingly. So then you're going on to probably the start of June, and you just select your delivery week and then your day of delivery. And the way we work is that's the day that you receive your queen, unless you receive a panicked phone call from us a few days before saying something's gone terribly wrong. But 99.9% of the time we do meet those dates, so providing Mother Nature gives us a helping hand, we will. Just go on and check out, really. And if you've had any disasters with queen rearing or beekeeping and you need to drown your sorrows, then head over to the mead section. Anything to celebrate, there's nice honey chocolates there as well. So if you need to, you say your wife's having a bit of a go because you've got honey all over the door handles in the house, then a nice bottle of sparkling mead and some honey chocolates would go down very well.
There we go, and you might get lucky as well. Who knows?
It's an aphrodisiac.
Yeah, Luke, thank you so much. Yeah, and don't forget, everybody, just type in Northumberland Honey anywhere, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, X, you're on Instagram, and especially on the website. If anybody wants to buy his queens or their queens, type in Northumberland Honey on Google. They will pop up. They're everywhere. Thank you very much, guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the next one. Thanks again, Luke. Thank you very much.
See you later.